Welcome back, everybody. Today we're doing a deep dive into something pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And that is the hidden world of impurities that are lurking inside all those supplements that you might be taking.
Oh, yeah. This will be fun.
Specifically, what we're really going to try to get to the bottom of today is what is really different between natural products like botanical extracts and their synthetically produced counterparts.
Yeah.
Because I have a feeling it's not always what you think.
It is not.
Okay, so impurities, first of all, that just doesn't sound good. Should we be worried?
Well, it's funny because it's not as simple as good or bad.
Okay.
To understand this a little bit better, I think it's helpful to talk about the endocannabinoid system, or the ECS.
Right. Yeah.
Just for a little bit of context, because it's heavily discussed in our sources.
Uh-huh.
And it plays a key role in a lot of these botanical extracts and how they work.
Yeah. The ECS, so for folks that might not be familiar, can you give us like a quick recap of that?
Absolutely. So the ECS is this complex system in our bodies that helps keep things in balance or in homeostasis. And it's involved in all kinds of stuff, from mood and memory to appetite to pain.
Wow. So it's a pretty big deal.
It's a big deal.
Okay, so we've got these impurities, we've got the ECS. How do these things all kind of connect?
Well, so think about the ECS like a delicate scale, all right?
Okay.
And even tiny amounts of certain compounds like THC can tip the balance of that scale. And what's really interesting is the concentration of those compounds matters a lot. So different amounts can actually have very different effects.
Interesting.
And we call that a dose-response relationship.
Okay, so then how do impurities fit into all of this?
So, natural products like botanical extracts are not just one single molecule.
Right.
They're more like a symphony of compounds. And besides the main active ingredient that we're all interested in, they contain all sorts of other stuff called secondary metabolites.
Secondary metabolites. I feel like I've heard that before. Remind me what that is.
Yeah, these are the things that give plants their color, their aroma.
Right. Okay.
They're also part of the plant's defense mechanism. And here's where it gets really interesting, is these additional components, which are often called impurities, are largely absent in synthetically produced molecules.
So if you make a synthetic version of, say, a molecule you find in a plant, you're basically stripping away all these other compounds.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And that's a key difference between the two.
So is that a bad thing?
Well, think about it like this. You can isolate a single instrument from an orchestra, and you can get a beautiful, clear sound.
Yeah.
But you're going to lose the richness and depth of the whole ensemble playing together.
I see what you're saying. Okay, so you're saying these impurities might actually be important.
Absolutely. They might be the secret sauce that makes these natural products so unique.
Interesting.
Because they can actually work together. These impurities can actually work together.
Okay.
To potentially boost the effects of the main active ingredient or even bring their own benefits to the party.
So they're working with the main compound, not against it.
Exactly.
How does that work?
So we call that polypharmacy.
Polypharmacy.
And it's this idea that multiple compounds work together to potentially create a synergistic effect that you wouldn't get from just a single isolated molecule.
Interesting.
And this is where botanical extracts really shine.
Okay, but I'm thinking don't natural products change from batch to batch?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's definitely something that we're going to explore more in part 2.
Okay.
But imagine harvesting botanical material for an extract, right?
Okay.
All these different factors, like the plant species where it was grown, even how it was harvested, can lead to all these differences in those secondary metabolites, which are impurities.
So kind of like different batches of wine can taste different, even if they're from the same type of grape.
Exactly. And that variability can make standardization really tricky. And that's why some people are kind of hesitant about natural products.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But on the flip side, this inherent variability might be part of what makes these natural products work so well for some people.
It's a paradox.
It really is.
So it seems like maybe we should think twice before we just grab that synthetic supplement bottle.
Yeah.
And consider maybe the power of these impurities in these natural extracts.
Absolutely, because understanding this difference, this idea that natural products are complex systems, that's key to appreciating their potential. And it's what truly sets them apart from those synthetically produced molecules.
This has been a really interesting conversation so far. I've learned a lot. I'm definitely curious to learn more about the challenges and the opportunities that these impurities might present.
Yeah.
So is that what we're going to be talking about in the next part of our deep dive?
Absolutely. We're going to delve deeper into those details, look at some specific examples and research, and see how scientists are working to understand and control these really crucial components.
Okay.
It's a fascinating area of study, and I can't wait to share more with you.
I can't wait to hear more.
All right.
We'll be back after a short break. So I've been thinking about these secondary metabolites
Yeah.
since our last conversation.
Uh-huh.
They really are like the unsung heroes of the plant world.
They are.
But we also talked about, the challenges they bring, like variability.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So remember how we were talking about all these factors, like the plant species, the growing conditions, even the harvesting methods?
Uh-huh.
All of those can lead to differences in these secondary metabolites.
Okay.
It's a bit like choosing between different types of coffee beans.
Okay.
Like a Kenyan bean is going to have a different flavor profile than a Sumatran bean,
Right.
even though they're both coffee.
Exactly. So even if two extracts are coming from the same plant,
Yeah,
they could have wildly different compositions.
exactly.
Okay.
And that can make things really tricky when it comes to standardization.
Right. Because unlike those, perfectly uniform synthetic molecules,
Yeah.
these natural products, they're unpredictable.
They are inherently a bit unpredictable.
Okay.
You might have one batch of an extract that's super potent,
Uh-huh.
and then another batch from the same plant but grown under slightly different conditions might have a much weaker effect.
That sounds pretty frustrating, especially if you're relying on a specific dosage
Yeah,
to get a specific effect.
it definitely can be. And that's why scientists are, constantly exploring ways to control and standardize these natural products.
So how do they do that?
Well, one approach is to focus on specific cultivars or strains
Okay.
that are known to produce consistent levels of the compounds that they want.
So it's like you're picking the plants that are going to be more predictable
Exactly.
in terms of their chemical makeup.
It's a bit like selectively breeding certain types of apples, Some apples are bred for sweetness, others are bred for tartness.
Right.
And so by controlling the genetics, you can exert a lot more influence over the chemical composition of that final product.
Makes sense. Okay, so that's genetics. But what about the other factors that we talked about?
Right.
Like growing conditions, extraction methods, can those be standardized too?
Oh, absolutely. So imagine you're harvesting botanical material for an extract.
Okay.
The location where that plant was grown, the quality of the soil,
Yeah.
even the way it was harvested, all of that can affect those secondary metabolites.
It sounds like the whole journey that the plant takes is just as important as the plant itself.
You got it. And so by carefully controlling those cultivation and harvesting practices,
Okay.
manufacturers can minimize that variability and create a more consistent product.
So it's all about creating like a standardized environment
Exact.
from seed to shelf.
You got it.
Kind of like what winemakers do.
Yeah, that's a fantastic analogy.
Okay, cool. So you're creating a terroir.
Exactly. And, this level of control, it's not just about consistency, it's also about safety.
Okay, why safety?
Well, because sometimes those impurities can be harmful.
Like what?
So, for example, there are these compounds called nitrosamines,
Nitrosamines.
which can actually form during some manufacturing processes.
Right.
And they're known to be carcinogenic.
Oh, wow, that sounds really scary. But I thought those were mainly a problem with like synthetic drugs.
While they're more common in synthetics, they can also pop up in natural products,
Really?
especially if certain precursor molecules are present.
So even if something is natural, it doesn't automatically mean it's safe.
Exactly.
Okay, so it sounds like we got to be careful about what we consume, no matter what the label says.
Absolutely. And that's why rigorous testing is really important.
Oh.
Manufacturers need to be absolutely sure that their products are free from those harmful impurities.
Right.
And that, the good stuff is within those safe and effective ranges.
But how do you even begin to identify and measure those impurities?
Yeah.
Especially considering how complex these extracts can be.
It's a bit like detective work, but luckily,
right.
scientists have some really powerful tools at their disposal.
Okay, what kind of tools?
So one of the most effective is chromatography.
Chromatography. I feel like I've heard that before.
Yeah.
Remind me what that is.
So think of it as like a molecular sorting machine.
Okay.
You pass a mixture through this special material,
Mm-hmm.
and the different compounds they separate based on their properties.
So some compounds are going to stick to that material more strongly
Exactly.
than others, so they move through more slowly.
Exactly. And so by analyzing how long it takes each compound to travel through,
Okay.
scientists can identify and quantify them.
So they can create like a detailed fingerprint of the extract.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty awesome.
It is. And it's what makes this area of research so fascinating, because there's always something new to discover.
Okay, cool.
But remember, those impurities, they also influence another really important factor, stability.
Right, stability. So you mentioned earlier that natural products, especially these botanical extracts, can be kind of finicky when it comes to their shelf life.
They can be.
So how do those impurities play a role there?
Well, think of it this way. Those secondary metabolites, they're not just sitting there passively.
Okay.
They can actually interact with each other
Uh-huh.
and with the main active ingredient.
Right.
And those interactions can change over time.
So over time, could those impurities cause the extract to degrade
Yeah,
or become less potent?
exactly. And that's a big challenge for manufacturers.
Right.
They're constantly trying to find ways to keep those beneficial compounds stable and prevent them from breaking down or, turning into something they don't want them to be.
So what are some of the ways that they try to do that?
Well, there are a few different approaches. One of the most common is just controlling the storage conditions.
Okay.
Think cool, dark, dry environments.
So like storing certain foods or medications in the fridge.
Exactly, because light, heat, and moisture can really speed up the breakdown of those delicate compounds.
Mm-hmm.
So proper storage is like a crucial sure step.
Right. But what about protecting those compounds more directly? Is there anything they can do to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Another strategy is to use antioxidants.
Okay.
So remember when we talked about those free radicals?
Yeah. The troublemakers?
Those free radicals can cause havoc on the stability of these natural products.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they can trigger oxidation, which leads to the breakdown of those beneficial compounds and can form those unwanted byproducts.
So the antioxidants are like the molecular bodyguards,
Yeah,
protecting the good stuff from being attacked.
exactly. And so by adding antioxidants to the mix,
Sorry.
scientists can significantly extend the shelf life of these natural products.
That's pretty smart. Are there any other techniques that they use?
Yeah, another intriguing approach is encapsulation.
Encapsulation. What's that?
It's like putting those sensitive compounds into a tiny little protective shell.
So they're shielded from the light, the heat, the moisture,
Yeah.
and the free radicals.
Exactly. And encapsulation can be incredibly effective for enhancing stability, making sure those compounds stay potent and, ready to do their job.
So it's clear that a lot of science and careful consideration goes into creating a high-quality natural product.
You're absolutely right. It's much more complex than just tossing some herbs into a bottle.
Right.
But there's another layer to all of this that's equally exciting, and that's this idea of polypharmacy,
Yes.
where those impurities aren't just passive passengers.
Right.
They're active participants in this whole symphony of effects.
That's what I'm really excited to learn more about. It's
Yeah.
like these impurities are holding the key to unlocking the true potential of these natural products.
Exactly, and that's what we're going to be exploring in this final part of our deep dive.
Okay, great.
We're going to look at how these impurities might work together, creating these effects far beyond what a single isolated molecule could ever achieve on its own.
All right, so welcome back to our final exploration into the world of impurities.
Yeah.
I have to say, it's pretty amazing to think about all the complexity that's hidden within these natural products that we've been talking about.
Yeah, it really is. We've talked about those challenges of variability and stability,
Yeah.
but now it's time to get into the most exciting part, polypharmacy.
I've been really looking forward to this. So this is the idea that the impurities are not just along for the ride.
Yeah.
They might actually be active players
Yes.
working together within these botanical extracts.
Exactly. And, this concept, it gets even more interesting when you start to think about just how intricate the endocannabinoid system really is, that ECS.
Right, the ECS, so that vast network of receptors and signaling molecules that are constantly working to keep our bodies in balance.
And what's fascinating is that even tiny amounts of certain compounds can influence that ECS in different ways.
Okay.
And it's not just about whether a compound activates a receptor or not, but it's about, how strongly it does it, which pathways it triggers, and how all of those pathways interact with each other.
It was like a really delicate dance going on.
Exactly.
With all these compounds kind of nudging the ECS in these subtle ways.
That's a great way to put it. And that's where this whole idea of polypharmacy comes into play.
Okay.
It's this idea that having multiple compounds working together, you can create a much more nuanced and targeted effect than any single compound could ever achieve on its own.
So kind of like an orchestra, where each instrument plays a specific role.
Yeah.
But it's really the combination of all of them
Yeah.
that creates the full, rich sound.
A perfect analogy. And, just like a conductor guides that orchestra,
Right.
those impurities and those natural products, they might be subtly kind of orchestrating the effects.
Okay, so they're doing things like enhancing the absorption of the main compound, modulating its activity,
Yeah.
maybe even adding their own benefits to the mix.
Precisely. And, we're actually seeing evidence of this polypharmacy in action,
Okay.
especially when it comes to research on botanical extracts. For instance, pain management is a really big one.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, pain is such a complex experience.
It is.
It's not just like an on-off switch.
And, a lot of traditional painkillers, they just target one pathway, and that can lead to, limited effectiveness and a whole bunch of unwanted side effects.
So how can this whole polypharmacy thing help with that?
Well, imagine if you could target multiple pain pathways all at once.
Oh, wow.
That's the power of this approach,
Yeah.
and it could revolutionize pain treatment.
So it's like a multi-pronged attack on pain.
Exactly. And some studies have even suggested that combining cannabinoids like THC and CBD, which interact with different receptors in that ECS, might actually be more effective for pain relief than using either compound alone.
Interesting.
They seem to work together to create this more balanced and targeted effect.
So this is all about synergy.
It is.
But I'm also curious about those secondary metabolites.
Right.
How do they fit into this whole picture?
They might be playing a really crucial role, for example, terpenes, which give cannabis that really distinctive aroma. They've been shown to interact with the ECS, and they could contribute to what's known as the entourage effect.
The entourage effect, what's that?
It's the term that's used to describe all those synergistic interactions between those different compounds in cannabis, including cannabinoids, terpenes, other phytochemicals. It's like they're all working together to create something that's greater than the sum of its parts.
So it's not just about THC or CBD on their own. It's about how they interact with all those other compounds in the plant.
Exactly. And, this concept could explain why some people find those whole plant cannabis extracts to be more effective than just isolated THC or CBD.
That's fascinating. It seems like we're just starting to really scratch the surface of understanding what polypharmacy could really do.
I think so. And, the more we uncover about all of these complex interactions, the more we realize how much we still don't know.
Yeah, there's a whole world waiting to be discovered.
Exactly. It's a field ripe for discovery.
I mean, it really makes you think differently about those impurities, right?
It does.
They might actually hold the key to unlocking all these new and more effective treatments for so many different conditions.
It's true. And what's really exciting is that, this approach isn't just being explored for pain management. Researchers are looking at the potential for things like cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, even autoimmune disorders.
It sounds like polypharmacy has the potential to really change how we approach medicine.
I think it does, and it really highlights just how incredibly complex nature is and how important it is to understand those interactions between all those compounds and our bodies.
This has been a really amazing deep dive.
Good.
I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for the power of natural products and how important those so-called impurities really are.
I'm glad to hear that, and hopefully this encourages everyone listening to be curious and to ask questions about the supplements they're taking.
Yes, definitely.
And to really appreciate that complexity of the natural world.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and taking us on this incredible journey. It's been fascinating.
Well, thanks for having me.
And to everyone listening, until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.